I really believe that there's a reason you're seeing this video right now, because if life suddenly feels unfamiliar, your thoughts have changed, and it feels like everything is flipping upside down, you're not crazy. You're going through an awakening. I've gone through a spiritual awakening, and I've guided many through theirs. And today I wanted to share with you what you'll see and what you'll feel as you go through this experience. And I just want to remind you that you're not alone in this, and it can feel scary and overwhelming, but I really believe that this video found you for a reason. So to start, let me show you the first thing you'll experience when you start to awaken. So before your awakening, you might have been aware that you have thoughts, right? You have this constant voice in your mind, a non-stop commentator in your mind that never shuts up. And I was aware of that too. I mean, yeah, there's constant chatter in my head, but it wasn't until I started to go through a spiritual awakening and also reading a lot of books and immersing myself more in the topics of consciousness that I started to realize that I fully identified with the voice in my head, that the voice in my head who constantly comments is not actually truly who I am. I mean, it's not who I am. Like, there are these two separate things. There's the voice in my mind, and then there's the awareness that is observing the voice in my mind. So the voice in my head might be judging, it might be making assumptions, it might, oh, my favorite thing is when it takes a little piece of information and then spins a whole story out of it and takes it as the truth or takes it as a fact, right? So before my awakening, I would just identify with these thoughts. If I picked on a little piece of information and my mind would turn it into a story, I would then believe it as if it was true, and then that would create a whole emotional reaction in me. You know, I might get fearful or sad or anxious just because the voice in my mind, you know, became a very elaborate storyteller. And then when I started going through my awakening, I started to see the separation. I was like, hold on a second, you know, when you have these different level of consciousness or different levels of awareness, I began to see myself and like this physical body of mine as something that is separate, right? Like, I believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So I am this spiritual, you know, being or essence in this physical vessel, which is my physical body. And then I have this voice in my mind, but then there's also the awareness that is observing that voice in my mind. So as I began to awaken, I started to see the separation, and it was incredible because I realized that not everything that I think I have to believe. Like, if the voice in my mind starts judging or start worrying about something, I can be the awareness and say, okay, I'm seeing the thoughts that I'm having, I'm seeing what feelings it might, create within me, but it's not true. And it's incredibly freeing, but at the same time, it just makes you realize that that voice in your mind truly never shuts up. I mean, sure, you know, during meditation, or there's certain moments in life where you have this like quiet and the stillness, but just going about day to day, it's just this constant chatter. So needing to kind of train yourself, or needing to make yourself so present that you are more and more the awareness observing the thoughts, and you're not just identifying with the voice that is constantly talking. So as you begin to awaken, you actually start to develop that consciousness, that awareness. Okay, maybe develop is not the right word because it's always been there, but you actually start to be aware of it. You start to be super, super aware of what you're thinking, what thoughts are in your head, and at the same time you start to question. And that's a really, really good sign when you start to question things, especially internally, right? You start to question your thoughts, you start to question beliefs. Why are you feeling a certain way? All of these questions are opening up your awareness and broadening your awareness and your consciousness. So if you are now super aware of the voice in your head and you realize that it's not truly who you are, that is one of the clearest signs that you are starting to go through your awakening process. And a second thing that happens outside the recognition of the voice is an experience that makes you feel the vastness of life. So just as I was saying that you have this constant noise in your mind, right? This monkey brain, this voice that never stops talking. As you go through life and you go through this awakening experience, you might start to have moments, or you might start to have these flashes of spaciousness and of stillness and of something greater. And what I mean by that is that suddenly experiences that you might have, ignored as something simple or not unimportant actually start to feel incredibly meaningful and very it really grounds you and brings you in the present moment, and it removes that noise in your mind. So for example, when you're in connection with nature, right? If you go to the forest or you're in the ocean, the ocean was always there, the nature was always there, but now as you start to go through an awakening process, it feels like it just brings you such peace, and it really quiets down your mind. So for example, for me, this happens all the time when I'm surfing. I love to surf. I do it very often. I try to do it a couple of times a week. And whenever I'm on the water, the way I feel, paddling for the waves and then getting on the wave and surfing, how quiet my mind is, how still I feel, how connected I feel to my own body and, to the ocean, and just being in this flow state, this beautiful experience. There are very few things in life that make me feel so calm and connected. And the other thing that I think I never really realized as a kid or as a teenager, because you have a lot going on and you're not as conscious or aware, is that I think spending time with family would always be like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, I'm just spending time with family, my grandparents want to do something with me, or I'm doing something with my mom. But now as I'm getting older, I don't know why it's actually gonna make me emotional. Now as I'm getting older, the weight or the importance of these experiences that I feel, it cannot compare to how it felt 4 or 5 years ago. As much as I realize that we're like spiritual beings having a human experience, I'm very aware of the human timeline. So, my grandparents are getting older. I only see them a couple of times a year. So it really, these instances, these certain events, they feel very different. There's so many moments where I'm just spending time with my mom, or I'm just spending time with my partner or with my friends, that we're not doing anything special. We might be just having dinner, or we might be just sitting next to each other. But it's this feeling of no noise and of stillness, and really just recognition that this is what it's about, right? I'm here to experience all of these emotions and be this human, but at the same time, it's really what makes it is the connection to other people and the connection to nature. And I'm the happiest when I'm surfing and I'm in water, and then I'm the happiest when I'm with people that I love. And even if there are friction moments or whatever, there really are these pockets that open up, and there are these pockets of presence and these pockets of just love and something greater that I could try and explain. But if you felt it, you know what I mean, because I can't fully explain what it feels like. It just feels like this vast connection to everything that cannot be explained. It feels like unity with all that is life. So when these flashes come in, it really feels like it's enough to keep you sane and to make you realize that there's something greater, because life is hectic. There's so much that we have to deal with as a human being. And if you're going through an awakening process, you start to become aware, that there are many people that are still asleep, and that a lot of things are put in place not for our highest good. But in these flashes, these moments of connection with nature and with a friend, or with a partner, in those moments that you really can't predict it feels like a lifeline to keep you sane and to remind you that there is something greater out there. For many of us, a spiritual awakening begins unexpectedly through something that is outside of our control. And many spiritual awakenings, unfortunately, are triggered by events that are intense and that flip our life upside down. So for example, you have a health crisis, or a relationship that ends outside of your control, a job loss, or an accident. Many spiritual awakenings are triggered by suffering, and it doesn't sound great, but if you are starting to experience, or if you are currently experiencing some type of suffering, just remember that it's the emotional state, right, that is quite vulnerable, and we have a lot of attachments. And at the end of the day, that's what creates suffering, right? Because, look, it's not a nice example to give, but if something happens to a person that you don't know, right, a health crisis, for example, you're gonna say, if it's a friend of a friend of a friend's friend, right? something happens, you hear about it through kind of like, you know, the people, you say, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, that's really unfortunate. But if something happens to your partner or your best friend or your child or your parent, that creates a lot of pain and that creates a lot of suffering, because we have these really strong attachments and a deeper connection. We know the people personally, and we might have had a job for many, many years. We might have lived in a certain place for many, many years. So many spiritual awakenings are triggered by suffering when one of these strong pillars, one of these really strong attachments that we've had suddenly, you know, gets cut. There is a video that I made about 5 signs that your higher self is trying to connect with you. I'm going to link it above, but that's what it makes me think of as well, that there is a greater power or source, universe, that decides to cut these cords for you, decides to say, okay, this relationship is actually not good for you, or this job is not serving you anymore, or you need to have a very intense physical experience like a health crisis to kind of really shake you up and wake you up. Because the thing is, suffering is the entry point. So intense depression, intense grief, trauma, or addiction can lead to a profound awakening. And why is that? It's because something so shocking needs to happen to shake you up. And if you have been so asleep, if you have been consciously or unconsciously so set on holding onto these attachments, whether they are good for you or not, you need something drastic to happen to kind of shake you away. It's as if you've been in a really, 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 really deep sleep, and somebody has come up and started shaking you by the shoulders, waking you up. So just observe in your life what's happening right now. Are there certain things that are, you know, like certain cords that are being cut in your life that are outside of your control? You know, whether something related to a job or a family member or friends or a partner or a place of living. Because this suffering might be an invitation for you to rethink your life and to actually start focusing on something deeper. And perhaps you are being called to wake up and you're being invited to go through this spiritual awakening. And suffering is also something that humbles us, right? It connects us with those very raw and very deep emotions. It's not superficial. If you might have been super, super happy on this like superficial level, everything's great, suffering brings you to the depth of your emotions. It quite literally brings you to your knees. When I started going through my spiritual awakening, I was always somebody that just felt really happy, superficial emotions, everything was great. But my spiritual awakening created so much suffering. I really was in quite a dark place, and now that I'm out of it, as awful as it was, as much as I thought that I was going to get stuck in it, now that I'm out of it, it is one of the most profound experiences that I've had, and the experiences that I'm most grateful for, because that suffering, that pain, those attachments that my monkey mind was battling with, that's actually what created the transformation. That's what made me realize what's important. That's what made me realize more about myself and allowed me to let go of a lot of my trauma and a lot of the things that were no longer serving me. So yes, it's challenging and it's really difficult, but it humbles us and it opens us up to something greater. So again, take inventory of your life, and if you're starting to see that you might be going through something like this, you may be now going through a spiritual awakening. So as you become aware of the voice in your head, the constant commentator, and you begin to recognize that there's a separation between what you think and the voice in your mind and the awareness observing it, and as you start to have these little moments of, you know, pockets of connection and alignment and feeling like you're connected to life, and then at the same time the humbling experience of suffering, you will also experience 2 other things that kind of, I would say, go hand in hand. So as you begin to awaken to all the things that you have not been seeing about yourself, like for example for me, right, there was so much childhood trauma I never addressed or dealt with, and I kind of was living in this very, very happy place. The reason I do this is because it made me feel like I was just like living from my neck up. I never accessed anything deeper. And then I started to go through my awakening, and I feel like everything dropped down, and everything that I was feeling was just around like my tummy, my chest area. There was so much heaviness that I needed to let go. So it's as if this veil has been lifted. It's as if I, you know, started to finally see things that I was previously ignoring. As that was happening to my own self, that also started happening to me seeing the world as a whole. So as you start to awaken, you actually start to see life in a very, very different way. You might have been living through and going through life in a very superficial way, but now you just can't do it anymore. You're seeing the way the world functions is unfair. There's so many people that are asleep. The people that are in power have nothing, they're not working for the greatest good of all. And it can become very, very challenging to kind of function in this world. So as this veil has been lifted in the world and you're starting to see things not through pink-colored glasses anymore, at the same time you realize that you are a spiritual being having a human experience, and there becomes a challenge between these two distinctions. You know that you are energy and spirit, but at the same time you are in this human body. And this spiritual awakening experience really makes me think of the Matrix, right? When you need to choose between the red pill or the blue pill. Are you going to take the red pill and be awake and actually see the world in its entirety, or are you going to take the blue pill and you're going to remain ignorant and asleep? So as you are awake and you're aware of all of these things, it is quite challenging then to continue functioning in this world. And it really feels like this very delicate line that you are threading, and that's how it's been like for me. You really, it's hard. I mean, sometimes you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna focus on the light and the good, and you realize that you can make a beautiful impact on people and that your energy is transmuted and it affects others. At the same time, some mornings I wake up and I'm like, you know what, fuck it, the world is a dark place. I don't even know if what I'm doing is making a difference. Even if I'm all, good energy and being kind to people, I'm like, is it going to translate? Is it going to make a difference? So as you're going through a spiritual awakening, you really start to sometimes experience this confliction, or just like going from one side to another. Yes, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience and everything's great and my energy is important and, it like spreads. And on the other hand, you're like, you know what? Oh my gosh, it's just dark and it's heavy and I don't even know if anything is worth it anymore. And yeah, it's intense, it's very intense, but this is also another clear sign that you are going through an awakening, because you're starting to have all of these conflictions and you're very aware of the polarization, and you find yourself kind of like trapped between those two worlds. So if you're experiencing all of this, you're not alone. I'm seeing more and more people waking up, more and more people that are having so many questions that are going through this experience. And it can feel very isolating because we may not have so many people around us directly, but there are people out there, there are communities, and you're really not alone in this experience. So if you find yourself going through a spiritual awakening and you're struggling, watch this video next where I share with you 3 easy and powerful practices that can help ease your mental and physical symptoms.